Most people believe criminals use Bitcoin because it's anonymous. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if the real reason criminals use Bitcoin is not anonymity at all, but something far more surprising? Because here's the contradiction. Bitcoin is the most transparent financial system ever created. Every transaction is recorded forever. Every movement can be traced. And governments around the world have built billion-dollar blockchain tracking tools to monitor it. So, how is it possible that the criminal underworld continues to rely on Bitcoin? How does a traceable currency become the backbone of the digital black market? To understand the mystery, we need to go back to the early 2010s, when Bitcoin was still a curiosity. It had no real value, no major exchanges, no global regulation. Yet it attracted one group almost immediately: people who needed a way to move money outside traditional banks. Not because they wanted anonymous digital gold, but because they wanted access. Bitcoin required no ID, no paperwork, no bank official deciding who could participate. For the first time, a global financial system existed that anyone could use, including people governments didn't want inside the financial system. And that was the beginning of the misunderstanding. Criminals didn't flock to Bitcoin because it was invisible. They flocked to Bitcoin because traditional banking had shut them out. The first major case that revealed this was Silk Road, a Darknet marketplace in 2011 that accepted only Bitcoin. Journalists believed Bitcoin was an untraceable digital cash, but law enforcement quickly realized something else. Every payment created a public trail leading directly to the seller, the buyer, and the criminal network behind them. And yet Silk Road processed over $1 billion in transactions. Why? Because criminals were not trying to hide from the blockchain. They were trying to hide from banks. In the old world, you needed a mule, a cash courier, a corrupt banker, or a forged ID to move money. In the Bitcoin world, you needed nothing. No gatekeepers, no approvals, no questions asked. But the system evolved. As governments learned to analyze blockchain data, criminals adapted too. They realized anonymity didn't come from Bitcoin itself. It came from the gaps between platforms. The vulnerability wasn't in the blockchain. It was in the infrastructure around it. So they built a new ecosystem: mixers, tumblers, privacy wallets, OTC brokers, chain-hopping services, and unregulated exchanges in countries with weak financial laws. Suddenly, a single Bitcoin transaction turned into a maze. A payment might start on a US exchange, jump to a mixer in Eastern Europe, split into dozens of smaller outputs, reappear on a crypto for cash desk in Dubai, and finally land inside a privacy coin like Monero, where the trail went completely dark. The blockchain was traceable. But now, the person behind the transaction wasn't. The twist is even deeper. In many parts of the world, criminals don't convert Bitcoin back into cash at all. They use it directly as money inside black market economies. Cybercrime gangs pay ransomware demands entirely in Bitcoin. Human trafficking groups use Bitcoin to buy logistics and forged documents. Drug cartels use crypto to buy chemicals and equipment. Sanctioned governments like North Korea steal crypto and use it to fund weapons programs. Russian networks use it to bypass banking restrictions. In these cases, there is no point where the money touches a traditional financial system. Bitcoin has become a full-scale internal currency inside the shadow economy. The most powerful criminal organizations don't try to hide the transaction. They try to avoid ever returning to the regulated world. This is why chain hopping became one of the most common techniques. A criminal may convert Bitcoin to Ethereum, Tether, then to a privacy coin, then back into a stablecoin, all in minutes, through decentralized protocols that require no identity. These systems were not built for criminals, but criminals learned to use them better than the regulators who designed them. Governments responded with unprecedented surveillance. Blockchain analysis firms track wallet clusters, identify mixing patterns, and monitor movements through exchanges. But criminals evolved again. They began using crypto mules, tens of thousands of people around the world who lend their wallets for a fee. They began using hardware wallets, passed across borders like physical contraband. They began using Telegram-based OTC desks in Dubai, Hong Kong, and Istanbul, where millions of dollars change hands without ever touching a bank. The goal was not to escape the blockchain. The goal was to escape identity. That's the real secret. The blockchain shows the money. It doesn't show the person, and criminals operate in the gap between the two. But here's the unexpected truth. Despite all of this, Bitcoin is still a terrible tool for crime. Drug cartels still prefer cash. Human traffickers still rely on how corrupt politicians still move money through shell companies, not crypto. So why is Bitcoin still used at all? Because Bitcoin is not the criminal's first choice. It's the criminal's last resort. When banks reject them, when cash becomes dangerous to move, when global sanctions block access to the dollar system, Bitcoin is the backup plan. Criminals don't use Bitcoin because it's perfect. They use Bitcoin because it's available. And yet, the digital black market has grown regardless. In 2022, over $20 billion in illicit crypto transactions were recorded, the highest ever. Ransomware, darknet markets, sanctions, evasion, extortion, tax evasion, investment scams, and stolen funds all contribute to this rise. But the number is misleading. Much of what the public calls crypto crime is really traditional crime, using a new tool. Crypto didn't create the underground economy. It simply plugged into it. The pattern is clear. Every time governments tighten financial controls, criminals migrate to the next unregulated space. When banks strengthen the KYC rules, criminals move to offshore banks. When offshore banks tightened rules, criminals moved to shell companies. When shell companies were targeted, criminals moved to crypto. And when crypto becomes fully regulated, criminals will find something else. The financial system pushes crime forward. Bitcoin is just another chapter. But here's the final twist, the most important one. Criminals may use Bitcoin, but governments need Bitcoin too. Not for crime, but for surveillance. Bitcoin gives authorities a level of visibility into the underground economy they never had with cash. Entire cybercrime networks have been dismantled because of blockchain forensics. Billions in stolen funds have been recovered. Bitcoin is a weapon used by both sides. Criminals for access, governments for detection. So, what does all of this mean? It means the story we've been told, that criminals use Bitcoin because it is anonymous, is completely backward. Bitcoin is not the dark web's preferred currency. It is the currency of a world where regulation creates new shadows and technology creates new loopholes. It is not the heart of the underground. It is the bridge that connects the underground to the regulated world. And as long as the global financial system continues to exclude people, restrict access, and tighten control, criminals will keep using whatever option remains traceable or not. The black market doesn't care if the tool is perfect. It only cares if the tool works. And Bitcoin, for now, still works. If you want to understand how money, crime, power, and global finance really operate behind the surface, subscribe to The Dark Economy. Because the real story isn't just about technology. It's about the invisible systems shaping the world you live in.